Norman here, and I'm here with Raz. Raz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. It's late in the evening in Sydney. I'm back here after 2 months in Europe. Cannot complain, my friend.
Good. I heard you just had two birthday parties. How were they?
Yeah, we just had two 3-year-olds celebrating their birthdays. I've seen children stuff their face with cake. I've seen tantrums. I've seen balloons. I've seen cries, and I've seen a lot of devices used to stimulate and distract them, and parents getting pissed in the background. One of the birthday comprised Russians, the other one comprised Persians. I will not make any comments of political nature, but it did provide for a lot of flavor from a cultural perspective. How are you going?
I am doing great. I'm going to get married in a few days, but I'm really excited about today's episode.
Let's just dive right in. I want to give a compliment to the beautiful paintings behind you.
Thank you. It's not mine. Thank you. I appreciate it. So it's born for very old people. So today we are talking about the spiritual or the lack thereof. We're going to be going through two books. Mine is being The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. And yours will be?
I'll be speaking broadly about Mircea Eliade, but the basic book that I think covers it really well is A History of Religious Ideas, which is a 3-volume compendium of basically great religious ideas, pretty much all of the big ones.
I see. So this is like an encyclopedia?
More obscure.
Okay.
It's in some respects, it is a narrative. It's a synthesis of all the religious stories, the broad ones that are out there. And Mircea Eliade is actually Romanian originally. Spent some time in France. Won't make any comments about the political beginnings, which were very tumultuous for him during the Second World War. But he did end up in the U.S. at the University of Chicago, and that's when he published the series of books and actually kind of built a whole practice, a whole academic discipline around religious ideas. I think in the 60s, 70s. He died in the 80s. And he is kind of a world-renowned scholar on religious ideas.
That's awesome. I still get bogged down on his name. Like, you pronounce it so differently than what I expect. I guess an American would probably call it what? Mircea Eliade?
Mircea Eliade. I would say Mircea Eliade. But
I'm really digging deep into this author's life and story. Huh?
Maybe Eliade, like like Iliad from Homer.
Iliad, yeah, like the Greek stuff. Did he look like a Greek warrior as well, or probably not?
It depends. When he was 80, he looked very much unwarrior. When he was young, he had glasses, so he was looked like a bit of a warrior nerd, a bit of a Harry Potter.
That's unfortunate. He can still look like Harry Potter, I guess. Yeah, I was called Harry Potter in school when I got glasses. That was their go-to insult for me. But jokes on them, because I liked Harry Potter.
Exactly.
Not really. I was pretty well built, so I could punch back if I could. I just needed to wait until they punched, so I had an excuse to.
Those Slytherins, you smashed them at a game of Quidditch.
Game of Quidditch, Game of Thrones, whatever. A few words about Dawkins as well, and then we can jump into the meat of the topic. Dawkins's book.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so Dawkins's book is called The God Delusion. I would probably change the title to Guide to Every Religious Debate Ever. If you ever followed religious debates online, creation, evolution, that sort of stuff, it's like a perfect blueprint for that. It
Wonderful.
has all the common
arguments.
Great. Yeah, so it's...
Why are we doing that? Why have we picked religious topics for this episode?
I'm blaming you. I have no idea.
We are the classical amateurs, and we've spoken a lot about self-help books and the Elon Musks of the world and science fiction and Dostoevsky, but I think you can't avoid the elephant in the room when it comes to classical books, which is religious ideas, and we haven't approached the Bible yet, because I haven't read it yet.
Neither did I, so we're not talking about the Bible.
Well, we are talking about texts that synthesize it, at least, like the Blinkist of the Bible.
Yeah.
No plug intended, although please, Blinkist, sponsor us.
To be fair, I think The God Delusion is seen by many as a classic book. And after reading it, I mean, I get it. I get where it's coming from. One of my criticism towards it, that I think it was very much written for atheists. The book doesn't seem to really get bogged down on convincing religious people that their beliefs are wrong. Maybe a few might question it, but I think book is mostly just laid out for an audience that already agrees with it. It makes some good points, but I don't think it's like really convincing enough, really useful enough to actually build any substance on top of it. I'll go into it a bit more details, but do you want to talk about your religious ideas first?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not as polemical as Dawkins. If it's very kosher in terms of what he's trying to achieve. But maybe I'll get to the controversial part in a moment. But what he's really trying to do, he's got 3 volumes, right? Just to lay out the blueprint. The first volume, it's really chronological. He's marrying up history and religion. So he's taking the first book will be the Stone Age religions, caveman type of thing, all the way to some Greek early. They're called Eleusinian, if I pronounce it correctly, Eleusinian mysteries. Some rites of passage related to vegetation and seasonality and transformation in the human body that I have not fully understood myself. Then the second book is about Buddha and the story of Buddha, all the way to Christianity and its evolution. And the last volume is about the Islamic reform, let's say, or Islamic emergence, so Muhammad, all the way to Luther, to the age of reforms. So he's trying to be really, really concise. And I think his merit is actually how synthetic, how well he manages to synthesize all the main ideas of each religion and just describe them. And it's a very, very enjoyable read. Just to give you just a flavor of the first one, he talks about, how women were seen in the Stone Age. If you remember those statuettes of women with very, very curvy shapes, very, very fertile. The
fertility statues.
Whatever you like to call them.
Big booty bitches.
Yeah, well, basically these pottery things, just to put it more less controversial. And then kind of the relationship between the renewal of nature and so on. This is just an example, all the way to, if you're really interested in like learning about the Greek gods, you have the synthesis over there. If you want to understand the story of Buddha and how that emerged and relationship with earlier, say, Indian sort of mythology, all the mythology is there.
Is this like a history book, or is he following certain
it's really
narratives?
More of a history book, yeah, for sure. But I think where he becomes a bit controversial is in making some assumptions from a narrative point of view. So basically, what he's really looking for is parallels and similarities between all religions, if you will. And I think that's what gets some people a bit excited, because he takes on this approach that he believes that religion is something intrinsic to human existence. It's unavoidable. It doesn't even challenge whether there is or there isn't a God. It's not about that. He sees religion or the sort of spirituality, I don't know how, sacred. He calls it sacred, just about everywhere. And I think there's a story that he gives around, if you remember the biblical story of Moses and the bush that comes flame, giving the sign to the burning bush metaphor, that
burning bush,
as to which God reveals himself to Moses to show him the path of escaping Egypt and so on. And so this manifestation of the sacred, he sees it everywhere. He even sees the profane, the stuff that has nothing to do with religious. If you look close enough, you will see something that is related to the sacred nature of existence. So he's in many senses, he's a humanist.
Was the burning bush like an ancient GPS? It was like that way. Is that what it?
Yeah, it's like, are you there? Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it was basically a confirmation that there's something transcendental occurring in life.
And the GPS voice, the lady voice in the GPS, that was the voice of God. It was like, turn 200 meters, turn left. That could work.
Everyone has their own version of what that means. That's the beauty of it.
It is mine.
But I think he's more, just to take a step back, he's more of an anthropologist. Like he sees the homo religiosus, if you want. Like we've always been, it's part of our nature. It's helped guide us in our civilization for thousands and thousands of years. And he does an amazing job at a few things where he's a specialist. So he's a specialist in alchemy, but I won't talk about it because I can't even describe it. I'm that much of an amateur in alchemy. Or maybe I can
like
say
gold
that
making?
It's transformation of various metals into gold, but it's ultimately the search for is it the Holy Grail at the same time? It's very, very complex in terms of what that means. Ultimately, it's the truth, and it's something transcendental that right? Goes beyond life and death. And
It's
so on. I don't really
essentially,
understand why they were doing it.
my understanding is like this whole alchemy was essentially chemistry for religious people. Kind of chemistry kind of like kicked off from alchemy because all these idiots trying to make gold essentially created everything else. Some of them becoming useful, actually.
Those were the
So,
consequences of alchemy. But the reason why they were doing it was a very religious experience that had to do with trying to understand materiality and understanding how to transcend materiality effectively. But I was going to say he was an expert in shamanism, which I absolutely loved. And also he's an expert in yoga. So he was one of those guys, in the 70s that brought yoga into mainstream by actually describing it. He was a practitioner of yoga. And if you think about it, right, yoga is everywhere now, part of our culture. And he was he lived in India as well. And he's got, he's had an immense influence by bringing that to surface into a world, in a kind of Western world, that it became more like Dawkins, right, describes it. So interesting how that's kind of his point, is there's a sacred manifestation, even the most profane. And you see it happening all the time.
I do pray to God when I see something really complicated in yoga that I don't think I can do. So
a twist.
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible?
Anything, really. I'm not flexible.
And then when you do it, you're like, oh, there is a God. I am able to bend.
Thank God. Yeah,
I guess I'm still able to do that pose.
I guess in that sense, he probably agrees. Dawkins agrees with him to a certain extent, because Dawkins also has argued that religion has a psychological, I guess, cultural thing, or even like religion is in your DNA, that made a lot of these religious figures and religious teaching rise out of nowhere, right? So, he talks about how, religion is coded in our DNA, and how, natural psychology actually explains a lot of the religious ideas. What I do find interesting about that is another book we talked about, Jonathan Haidt's Righteous Mind, also talked about this, but he actually ended up in a complete different location by the end, because Dawkins basically says, well, it's part of our natural psychology, so why do we really care about it? It's not that it's not important, but like, it's clear that we just made this shit up because our brain is trying to comfort us. So why do we act like it would be real, right? Beyond the DNA stuff.
Yeah, I mean, all of that is a bit of a cyclical definition in my view. It's kind of simplest, we have this DNA, therefore, how does it? The DNA created the brain is tricking us. and it's kind of, it doesn't really provide a meaningful explanation of why this is necessary, and where, even if it's still real or not. It's saying just because our brain is perceiving it doesn't mean that it's not real. Like, our brain perceives a lot of things that are real without tricking us.
So what are the other controversial aspects of your book?
I mean, I think there's some elements that not everybody agrees with, in terms of kind of the symbolism that he's very much attached to, right? He has some he's trying to be very syncretic in putting together Zoroastrianism, Jewish mythology, Christian and Muslim, and he's trying to extract the essence of that and create kind of his own concepts that is kind of hard to get
syncretism
your head around. Syncretism or synchronicity?
At this point, I'm happy with either.
For me, this synchronicity was the idea that things keep popping up in your life, like obstacles,
patterns
of patterns, and they keep, because you are summoned to solve them or to respond to them, and they're formally forms of revelation to some extent. That's, in my own words, how I understand synchronicity.
Sure. For Dawkins, I guess a lot of the controversial take you probably already heard or was seen somewhere. He argued how religious institutions are a hotbed for corruption. Cue all the pedo jokes about priests, as well as how a lot of the religious stuff can be disproven by science. I think these are like common arguments to make. What I also found interesting about him is he argued that fence-sitters, people are like agnostics, people that are just like, they don't really care about religion that much, or they didn't really make up their mind. They are like, they are bad. Like, he basically doesn't like agnostics. He doesn't like the fence-sitters. And I found that a bit hostile. Like, I feel like, if they want to be left alone, they should be left alone. These people don't want to engage with your religious stuff, so why would you bother them?
Sounds like a pretty mean guy. He's like pointing fingers at everybody.
If you ever seen him in interviews, he's pretty harsh. He's not. he's reasonably entertaining. He's not rude or anything, but he has his own reasons.
I think Nietzsche said, and I'm paraphrasing very badly because I didn't really understand Nietzsche very well, but he said, "Tell me
who does
what your personality is like, and I'll tell you what flavor of philosopher you are." If you're a resentful asshole, you're gonna build a whole philosophy around that basically substantiates whatever you actually feel. Talk about synchronicity.
To be clear, in the house of classic amateurs, we are not suggesting Richard Dawkins is an asshole. And if Richard Dawkins would like to jump on the podcast to discuss anything, we're more than happy to chat to him.
No, it was a generic if. I would never dare insult.
Please, Richard, don't hate us.
And it's only a battle of ideas here. It's nothing personal.
Nothing personal, Rich. Nothing personal.
We wouldn't dare.
Unless that would make you come to the podcast. In that case, fuck you.
We will. We do give a right to reply, Richard.
Yeah.
Is he still alive, by the way? Sorry to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is.
Okay, I wish him.
I have to check.
I wish him well. All the best. I hope he changes his mind. What have we learned by putting these two together? Because I disagree with the fact. I mean, saying that Eliade just does the synthesis and the history of it and doesn't have his own beliefs. I think he doesn't see things as just being anthropological or psychological when it comes to religion. I think he actually thinks there's something there that everybody experiences. It's kind of transcendental. Everybody's at the axis mundi, as they say, in the center of the. We're all the center of the earth, and that's kind of a consciousness is always sitting at the center of your known universe. And there's some. I can say it's all in your head and so on, but there's some very, very useful ideas, I think, in leading life, and that they aggregate very well into human behaviors that have allowed us to survive and thrive for thousands of years. And he's kind of poking it.
Would you describe this guy, Mr. Eliade, as a religious person or spiritual person, at least?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he went through this journey when he was young and resentful, and he had maybe potentially right-wing inclinations and so on. And I think he went through a journey of discovery, and he went to India and discovered yoga, and then he actually regrew and shamanism, which is obviously pre-Christian, and he basically came to some conclusions that drove him to put his work together around the universality of religious ideas and why we kind of need them and how they are a reflection of something that's really deep, but it's very hard to express. But he personally went through a journey of discovery, and then he was able to write academic books about useful to others, and he taught it in a very, very good way that made him a world personality, a world known figure on the topic.
I think both Dawkins and your author, whose name always escapes me, Eliade,
Mircea Eliade.
Eliade has found very similar patterns in religion. They obviously came to their own conclusions and kind of like swing to different sides. Eliade becoming a bit more spiritual and yoga and Zen and all that other stuff, while Richard Dawkins was basically a Redditor as a result. So I do recommend everyone to try to read either of the books, or maybe both, and support us, follow us, yada, yada, yada. So that wraps it up for me.
No, well said. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little chat.